Hey everybody, it's Eugene Lee Show, and welcome to Forensics Talks. We're back again this week. No real big announcements, just as always, if you are watching this on YouTube, by all means, please just put in where you are from. Where you're watching from is always interesting for me to know. I literally just finished a bloodstain pattern analysis workshop on some new software. Almost didn't make it on time, cutting it a little bit tight, but the International Association of Bloodstain Pattern Analysis is actually going on this week. And so I imagine some of you are wrapped up in that here, and hopefully you'll catch this later on. So today we're going to be talking about firearms and Toolmarks. And my guest is Mohammad AlShamsi, and he's the head of the Firearms and Toolmarks section at the Dubai Police. So he's coming to us live from around the world. He graduated from the first INTERPOL Young Global Police Leaders Program in 2019, and he's a member of numerous international associations such as AFTE, so that's the Association of Firearms and Toolmark Examiners, of which I'm also a member. And he is the point of contact for the Middle East and West Asia region and the first Arabic certified Firearms and Toolmarks Examiner. And so a little bit of an accomplishment there. AlShamsi represents the Middle East region at the International Association for Property and Evidence and is the first certified property and evidence specialist in the Middle East and Asia. He's also an adjunct faculty member at the International Institute for Forensic and Security Studies and Amity University for the bachelor's and master's students in forensic science ballistics and advanced ballistics course. And he's lectured and trained more than 2,800 attendees in events and training courses since the beginning of 2017. So let me bring him on in here. There he is. Hey, Mohammed, how are you doing?
Hello. How are you doing? Pleasure being here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. And I know it's a little bit later in the day for you, but around the world, through the magic of the internet, we have you here. Yeah. So I want to start at the beginning, and that is that I always like to ask my guests about how they got started. Were you always the little kid that were always interested in science, and you were kind of interested in technical stuff or this sort of thing? And what was your path getting into this field?
Okay, so I used to be the kid who looked up to his uncle, who used to be a police officer, and I was the kind of kid who used to never study. Seriously never studied until high school. For some reason, something got on to me, and I was like, okay, I need to do this right now. So I liked it. I mean, I liked science, I liked math, I liked all of the nerdy stuff, if you will. And became an engineer after that, and fell into firearms and Toolmarks by mistake. So after becoming a sponsored student for Dubai Police, which means after I complete my bachelor's degree, they would actually have a vacancy for me to work there in the forensics department. However, I was set to be a forensics engineer. And as soon as I had the first 2-3 days, we had this rotation in the lab. So you'd go visit every single discipline in order for you to get the feel and know what each section does. I was like, nope, I want to play with guns. I want to play with guns. So this is the story behind how Mohammad AlShamsi got into the firearms and Toolmarks field.
So you started when then? It was with
back in 2014.
Okay. And I mean, you've made a bit of an impact, I think, because I see you online. I see you're pretty active in the community. You're doing stuff with AFTE. You're doing a bunch of different things. So do you think that having the engineering background or whatever was a good fit for being in the firearms section?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I studied my bachelor's and master's degrees, both were in mechatronics engineering. So I get the mechanical part with regards to firearms mechanisms, internal ballistics, whatever the case may be. We deal with sometimes tasers. We call them less than lethal weapons. So you would measure the power or the energy of that. In terms of pressure, we also we measure the kinetic energy of air guns in order for us to determine whether or not they need certain registrations in the UAE, specifically in Dubai. There is no, I believe there is no kind of bad science out there. But definitely engineering suited me well with regards to entering the field of firearms and toolmarks. And one of the I guess the perks of being an engineer is you actually play around a lot with tools. And I was the kind of guy who used to modify his car and race and whatever. So I spent days, it's not even hours, days in garages, grease, oil everywhere. So I learned a thing or two about tool marks. So as soon as I got in, I'm like, yeah, give me that size 12 span. They're like, we don't even know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have has the Dubai police had a firearms section for a very long time?
Yeah, so the actual lab was developed in 1982. Okay, and since the development of the lab, there was one of the few disciplines out there was the firearms and toolmarks. Firearms and toolmarks has been around for since 1835, if I'm not mistaken, and so it's one of the oldest forensic sciences out there. But yeah, today even firearms and toolmarks are changing daily. So we've got a couple of things that we may even share during the session today with regards to how firearms actually changed since, let's say, hand cannons, matchlocks, modern firearms, and even today when you have firearms that have are electronically enhanced for safety concerns.
Okay. Yeah. So like here in Canada, like handguns are restricted, and so long guns are more like for hunting and things like this. But there is actually a lot of gun owners in Canada, and so I'm just curious about in Dubai. Like, is gun ownership is it restricted? Is it fairly easy to get? Like in the U.S., for example, it's a little bit easier to get. In some states, it's very easy to get for
Yeah.
firearms. So I'm wondering, do you have to deal with registered, non-registered weapons? Like, what kinds of things do you typically see?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, Dubai, the UAE in general is very restricted with regards to firearms. So I would say, conservatively speaking, more than 85% of the firearms and toolmark labs out there have a higher ratio of firearms cases compared to toolmarks, whereas we have like the other way around. Some even say, why bother with toolmarks? They're much harder, and I would rather focus on this. So we have the hard stuff. So the majority of our cases are toolmarks,
Hmm.
you name it, pliers, wrenches, things that are completely weird. But we deal with striations and impressions the same way we deal with the rest of the evidence. We recently had a lot of success with tool marks on bones and cartilages. This year alone, we managed to identify tools in two cases, and we managed to actually cast or lift tool marks off bones and cartilages successfully, which had sufficient tool marks on them. Not the reason was it wasn't because we didn't have or the tools didn't match. It was because there were no tools to compare to,
Oh, I
whereas
see.
two were identified because they were suspected of being used. And one of them was actually weird because we had a big a big garbage bag with lots of swords and an
Oh,
axe
really?
were buried underground. I mean, it was a movie.
Oh, wow. So,
Yeah.
oh, I definitely want to ask you more about the tool mark stuff, but on with respect to firearms, is your lab like in terms of equipment, things like that? You're fairly well outfit in that regard, and you have,
Yes,
all
I
the
mean, before I go on, I mean, I would like to say whatever product I mention is not for endorsement.
right.
It's not the case where this is the best thing out there. This is just for demonstrative purposes. At the lab, yeah, we have two Leica comparison microscopes. We've got the IBIS system, which we acquire all our cartridge cases and bullets in there. We have three different types of exhibits that we acquire. So mainly the crime cases, whatever the case may be, whether it is a cartridge case or a bullet. Second of all, the registered firearms from the public. Whoever owns a firearm needs to register it on a 3-year basis. They need to keep on coming back in. We need to check if the parts have been changed. Even if they haven't, we need to just acquire them again and upload them on the IBIS. Last but not least, the law enforcement firearms. So even those, we go around before handling any officer or any department, those new issued firearms or whatever the case may be, they need to be acquired as well in the system. We have the Projectina Viginex comparison microscope, which was a very big plus because Projectina, compared to the other comparison microscopes, has a feature while being integrated with the IBIS. It allows you to actually have let's say, I would call it a remote virtual comparison microscopy. So you would actually place one cartridge or one bullet on one stage, and in another lab, you would place another cartridge or another bullet on another stage, and you can actually control both of them via your own microscope. So this is something that we recently had success with, whether it is for research purposes or casework.
Right. How big is your team there?
Okay, so our team is not very big. We've got 11 personnel, varying from experts, junior examiners. We've got technicians that are there, but at the end of the day, it's a teamwork. For us, we actually don't feel like it's work. You know, when you go to your friend's house and you just spend hours there. Similarly, we've got that friendship or brotherhood, if you will, over there. I mean, we play football on a weekly basis, at least once, go to the gym every day after work. I mean, imagine spending hours with the same guy and then you go to the gym and see him there again. But yeah, I mean, it's like family.
That's great. Well, that's good to know. And you mentioned research too. So are you, I mean, and of course you're affiliated or tied with some universities and things like that. So do you have students that are doing research concurrently with you?
Yes. So this is one of the things why I'm happy to do or teach at universities, because like any lab out there, there is hardly enough time to do research, and students always want to prove themselves. So my deal is I would supervise you, I don't mind, but these are the list of projects that the field of firearms and Toolmarks need you to go and explore in. So if you say okay to one of those topics, whether you are an individual or a team, I don't mind supervising you. And an added plus is the perks of being the head of the section is we can facilitate the lab equipment. So Dubai Police becomes an affiliate if the paper is published with regards to and the university as well.
Okay. Now I've spoken to you before, so I know you have a sort of you get involved in many different things in different areas. But is there one sort of area that you specialize in, or maybe it's a preference for you?
Yeah. So right now, this is right under the books and still not live. But this is let's call it an exclusive. So I'm just about to start my PhD.
Oh, wow.
And I'm focusing on toolmarks that are on bones and cartilages. The reason why is you'd see a lot of papers that are out there, yes, although it's excessive with regards to identification. The methods vary. I mean, the methods vary even with regards to research, it's all subjective in nature. So, for example, I would classify this tool mark after being whether enhanced or whether reserved or whatever process it goes through. You would basically score it from maybe 1 to 3, 3 being very clear, 2 not so clear, 1 not enough marks. But you would actually rely at the end of the day on your eyes. So going through all those articles, there wasn't one. Let's call it a. I wouldn't call it an optimum method, but at least a standard method to follow.
Right, right.
So the purpose of that is actually to provide quantitative measures in terms of standard operating procedure for labs out there.
Oh, interesting. And there will be another one pretty soon because we just submitted a paper that was looking at it. Now, it wasn't looking at the actual sort of identification, like trying to identify the weapon or whatever, but it had to do with trying to relate the amount of force on a specific type of knife and edge to the damage that it creates, which is pretty interesting. So that's really interesting that you get into that area, and that's super interesting. So do you guys have to deal with like now there's this 3D printing, there's people that make their own guns, there's people that are doing their own things. It's so easy nowadays if you are, somewhat a little bit technical or interested, if you do some research, you can download files and things like this. But do you have to deal with any strange things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, 3 or 4 years ago now, 4 years ago, the lab actually established a task force for to predict what are the crimes that may be committed using 3D printers, and if so, how can we be ready for them forensically speaking? And obviously, in the field of firearms, this is not something new. 3D printed firearms are actually out there. However, comparing it with traditional examination and identification methods, we found that there are 2 scenarios. So it's either the firearm would fire successively and it will continue to operate in a normal manner, or it would actually explode in your hand, whether you would fire it in the first time or more than one. So how would you go about identifying whether it is a bullet or a cartridge case to that specific firearm then? We found out that unless there are metallic parts, maybe it's a normal nail that operates in the similar manner as a firing pin. Maybe they have barrels inside the 3D printed firearms in order for the bullet to actually let's call it twist and stay stable. But all of these details were if you're interested in them, I mean, please feel free to. I've published an article in the AFTE journal back in 2018 or 19, titled 3D printed firearms comparison. So how would you, as let's say a crime scene investigator, handle such firearms if you went to a scene where you found an actual complete firearm or a 3D printed firearm, or the firearm has actually exploded? So you do that basically by handling or recovering each part, especially the metallic parts, whether it is a small nail, barrel, maybe it's something as small as a magazine. All of these matter at the end of the day.
Interesting. Yeah. So a while back, I did a little study with the RCMP here where I was 3D printing projectiles. So, and then you can put it together with blanks that you can get at the store. I probably shouldn't. I don't want to give anybody ideas here. I better be quiet.
Trust me, it's too late for that.
Yeah, too late now. Yeah, but that kind of thing, I mean, could potentially come up, right? And so, yeah, it's definitely an area nowadays that I think needs to be addressed. I mean, certainly, people making their own weapons is not a new thing. I mean, people have been making pipe guns and things like this that they've come up with or whatever. So people have been doing that, and they're very they can be very difficult to trace, right? So, and I think there may maybe be some people that were looking at if there may be a way to trace the filament or trace the material.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that might be there too. Interesting. I'd spoken to you before, and you had an interesting story I wanted to ask you about, but it's the nail gun story. Can you explain what happened with the nail gun?
Okay, so a nail gun, for those of you who don't know what a nail gun is, a nail gun is one of the tools that are used in construction, whatever the case may be, where you would actually have a tool similar to a gun, which pushes a nail into a surface. However, interestingly, it actually operates similarly to a normal firearm, because it operates on the combustion force of the propellant, which is actually in there. That said, I got married almost a year and a month ago now, and that day, like three months in, happy, having breakfast. My wife made me a sandwich. I was on the way to work, and I'm in a newly residential area, so the place is fairly new. There were workers who were placing signs on the road, and I was driving with my sandwich in my mouth, and all of a sudden I was passing by them, and I hear "Papa!" I swear I didn't know whether I swallowed I didn't know what to do. So I turned to my right, and the window on my right had like shattered glass. It looked like a bullet. So I stopped in the middle of the road, and usually we have a saying, don't get scared from the people who always get angry. Get scared from the people who you don't see angry. So maybe I'm those kind of people. So I got out and like fire in my eyes and things. But at the end of the day, I was like, what do you have in your hand? What actually happened? So the reason behind this was a normal nail gun has a plate in front of it. In order for it, if it does not penetrate the surface that is intended, it might ricochet and should hit or strike that plate and fall down. The people operating that nail gun did not have that plate. So imagine if it didn't even hit my car. Imagine if it just came back and hit him. So that was a different story on its own. But
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it's all good right now.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible. And how far were you from the?
Literally like 2.5 meters, 3 meters, 10 feet maybe.
Wow.
And we need to convert it really quick. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm good with metric or with material. It's all good. Very interesting. So let me ask you about the your membership with AFTE. So I mean, you're one of the first certified people with AFTE. And when did you first become certified with them?
Okay, so I have two certifications with the AFTE. First one was in 2020, where I became the first Arabic certified Toolmarks examiner, and in 2021, where I became the first Arabic certified firearms examiner. It was kind of when you start exploring in unexplored territories, especially with the AFTE being a very close population. You need to have, for example, three references from members that are already existing in the AFTE, etc. So in the beginning, we had our challenges because there were no members in the AFTE in the UAE, except one who actually retired by the time I joined. But yeah, besides that, we are working hard at the moment with the international liaison and resource ad hoc committee in the AFTE to actually provide services to make that process in terms of joining the AFTE much easier, providing resources for non-English speaking examiners, whether it is maybe translating the AFTE glossary to Arabic, Russian, whatever the case may be, providing different translations to the actual website. So we have there's always a nice story to share. different experience when you look at different labs, because the science is the same, but what you get is completely different. It's like a kid's meal sometimes.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, the main reason behind this committee is to bridge experiences, get them all together, share their stories. At the end of the day, you never know when something you might hear somewhere from a different examiner might help you out in a case that comes by.
Right. Now, can you explain a little bit about the certification process that you had to go through?
Yeah,
And also, are you looking to get, are there other people already certified, and are they looking to get certified?
sure. So yeah, the certification process is straightforward. As once you become a member, you can apply to get certified in one or all three of the certification fields. It may be the Firearms Examination or Identification Certification, Toolmarks, as well as GSR, GSR being distance determination. After once you apply, fulfill the forms, get all the required documents sent out to the chair of that committee. You need to have a proctor to act as, let's say, someone who would facilitate that examination process. The first part is the theory part, where you would need to pass a minimum of 70, I'm not mistaken, out of 100. 100 marks, 100 questions. So you need to have passed a minimum of 70 questions. After that, once you pass, you need to go through a practical examination. For example, if you're talking about firearms, you would have bullets and cartridge cases. If you're talking about tool marks, you would have striations and impressions. If you're talking about GSR, you would be talking about a bullet or a shotgun pattern. So it's fairly straightforward. I mean, and for sure, if there is anyone who needs any help out there, feel free to reach out to me or anyone on the international liaison committee. There are, I'm trying to get examiners, especially the new examiners, certified, for them to actually prove themselves. They, when you have someone who's fairly new in the science and they say, yes, we want to show them. But yeah, I mean, it's very nice setting the bar really high, so that when they actually get it, they know that they are really good.
Right, absolutely. Let me ask you a question about like in firearms examination or even Toolmarks, what areas do you feel currently need a lot of work, or where there maybe are more opportunities that need focus, or that need research and a little bit more scientific foundation?
Okay, so with regards to firearms and toolmarks, I mean, at the moment everything is moving from the traditional light comparison microscopy. So since 1925 till today, the light comparison microscopy is the weapon of choice. But now we see a lot of virtual comparison microscopy. However, I would say standardization is not there yet. So you would see equipment which has finer detail compared to another. The scanning method differs between one type of hardware compared to another. Before, the format was an issue. Now there is an X3P format, but still not all of the products out there use the same format. The reason behind that is when you share files, you don't share them in 2D format. You share them in 3D format, so you have the extra depth of it out there. There was also the concern of calibers. So someone might rely on the size of calibers on NATO standards. Someone might rely on the CIP standards. Someone just names it for the sake of it. So there is still work that needs to be done with regards to moving to a more digitalized or virtual manner. There is something that is that had great impact, which is the quantum 3D microscope by Ultra Forensics. The quantum 3D microscope, it was not just a virtual microscope. It had the RBL graph with it. So this is also an algorithm that focuses on line counting and pattern matching in order for you to get a quantitative measure out of it. So you would say, for example, this is a true match, 1 in 10 million. For example, so you would give more quantitative results with regards to courts. It's not just, yes, this is sufficient to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's important. And so does like a lab like yourself, do you establish some of your own standards, or you have to do some of your own testing to to sort of be certain that everything is working in order? Proficiency testing and things like this?
So we are ISO 17025, ILAC G19 accredited, and including those, we do our own training, facilitating the entire training program. So, for example, if someone new joins the Firearms and Toolmarks section, they need to go through a minimum of 6 months training period. And upon finishing each criteria within that training program, they need to pass a theory test, a practical test, and a competency test before performing any kind of examination. They get authorized accordingly. Annual proficiency tests are completed via outside vendors such as CTS, Ron and Smith and Associates, because one of the other things we do in the Firearms and Toolmarks section is footwear and tire tracks examination. And we need to be in let's call it a top form, especially when you have examiners that are anxious and need to have a little bit of patience with them.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So in the case of like tire track or tire marks and things like this, do you have any, are you using any other 3D technologies and things like that? I'm a big 3D person. That's what I do kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm always interested and curious to know how, or if people are moving from 2D to 3D like they did in firearms. Like, when looking at cartridge cases and stuff, there seems to have been an increase in the, like, for example, in some cases in the number of hits, but also in the quality of the data that they gather.
Not at the moment. At the moment, we photograph, quality photograph our footwear and tire tracks. We lift them using casts. We lift them using gelatin, adhesive lifters. I would say the normal methods that are out there. However, with regards to 3D, it's not actually out there yet. You have that variation. Similarly in fingerprints, it's not always the same thing. I would say it's still early for the technology, not to actually capture the evidence, but to actually start correlating against a database.
Right. Yeah. Well, and also the ensuring that you have the proper methods, like somebody needs to come up with it, because the problem becomes a little different when you're working in 3D than just 2D. So yeah, that can be a little different. Hey, has COVID affected you guys at all in terms of your work and that sort of thing? What kinds of things have you been having to do because of COVID?
So in terms of COVID, we split actually our team into two. So we had a 2 shift rather than 1 shift. We had an hour in between to actually sanitize the place before the second shift comes in. So in order for us to minimize contamination, and if someone gets, for example, let's say got COVID, the entire shift would stop, but the second shift would take over and keep on going. Second thing was, in terms of evidence, one of the journals published how long would COVID maintain its effectiveness on surfaces such as metal, paper, plastic, etc. And we read that it maintains its effectiveness on metallic surfaces, which what we deal with, to a maximum of 5 days. Or we would simply spray it with with something that kills the bacteria or kills disinfects the surface, and you're good to go in 30 seconds. But as a precautive measure, we would stick to the 5-day plan. For us, we took it very seriously. So no one touches the evidence as soon as we receive them for 5 days. After those 5 days, we open the packages. We desanitize or sanitize them, sorry, and then we start examining them. Last but not least, this is something I wouldn't call it a fluke, okay, but this was something that we were very fortunate to do before COVID and had affected us positively during COVID. So we established a mock virtual testifying room within the lab itself. So the entire General Department of Forensic Science and Criminology, we had one specific room for any virtual witnessing, if you would say. So instead of going to the public prosecution or going to the court, you would actually stay there within the lab and you would do it remotely, which was had a very positive effect during COVID.
Yeah, interesting. But in your lab, the lab is you have all different disciplines. I mean, aside from firearms, I mean, is everything housed in one spot?
Yes. So everything except the medical examiner's office. It's a different building, but like literally our neighbor. Okay. So we have a lot of disciplines. For, let's say, the departments, crime scene, medical examiners, digital forensics, criminology, and we would call them the last but not least the specialized forensics department. And within just that specialized forensics department, you've got let's say firearms and toolmarks, question and documents. We've got trace, explosive, and even nuclear forensics out there to deal with radiations, etc. Forensics engineering, arson, toxicology, chemistry, etc. Biology.
And in terms of like the region and sort of the types of areas that you cover, do the police have other like departments in other locations in other areas, or is everything central to Dubai?
Okay, so Dubai Police is a police force that is only in Dubai. However, we get casework from other Emirates, and we are more than happy to help anytime.
I see. So do you have, like, for example, the people that are actually going out to the scenes and collecting evidence, I mean, are they fairly well trained on firearms, how to recover and all this sort of thing? Like, and do you train some of that training or no?
Yes. So not only us, but we also we had a lot of help with the establishment of the crime scene department back in the day with the association of the FBI. So the FBI had a lot of or helped the department a lot in preparing the crime scene investigators, whether it is just let's say recovering firearms or even handling explosive scenes. So bomb goes off. How do you recover evidence? Even something as simple as wires in IEDs in order for us to compare with Toolmarks later on.
Oh, so you do that as well, like looking at the IED stuff and looking at Toolmarks as well. Oh, interesting. And the group that does the IED is also housed in your group, in your department, or is it part of your group?
But as long as it's Toolmarks, we handle that. It's not like, for example, if I'm not mistaken, the FBI has TDAC. So the explosives or the IEDs team is on its own, and the Toolmark is there rather than the ballistics, which is in Quantico. But yeah, I mean, for us, we do everything from let's say from cutting wires or pipes up to bones, IEDs,
Yeah.
even fingernails.
You mentioned the FBI, but do you also do like how are you? Do you have any partnerships or things like this, or do you work closely with other like adjacent countries or adjacent agencies?
Okay, we don't have partnerships per se. However, we have strategic partnerships with law enforcement agencies, such as the FBI, such as there's federal German police, other law enforcements that are out there, which have been, let's say, crucial in the development of the lab. And this relationship keeps on going and growing in terms of collaborating with regards to information, whether it is training, whatever that is out there actually.
So what kind of things do you see are sort of the future things happening in firearms examination? What are maybe like some of the big things or futuristic things? Like, is there any talk about, for example, using artificial intelligence for these types of things? Is there any talk about, applying some of these advanced probabilistic methods to some of the work that you're doing?
Okay, so this is something that we came across really recently, and we came across a firearm that actually was enhanced using digital or electronic safety features.
Hmm.
The firearm was Armatics IP1, a German firearm, and it had a wristwatch, the IW1 wristwatch, in order for the operator to actually activate the wristwatch while having the firearm in hand in order for him or her to fire uh, successfully. Sorry. However, if, for example, the firearm was at home and someone tried to fire it, it would not go off because they would not have that wristwatch which is synced with the firearm.
Hmm.
It operates in a interesting manner. The firearm operates on batteries, and those batteries send the signal to electromagnetic locking mechanism, which pulls down a Faras, let's call it a barrier, in the slide of the
Mm.
firearm. So that barrier in the slide of the firearm acts as a wall between the hammer and the firing pin. So even if you pull the trigger and the hammer keeps on striking that barrier, the firearm will not move unless that electromagnetic lock is activated and it pulls down that barrier. We posed this question in the AFTE seminar recently, last month. The firearm actually had vulnerabilities with it. Three main vulnerabilities. The firearm can you can have the wristwatch 10 feet away and have a relay that replays the signal, and the firearm would actually operate. This is one. The second one, if you had the same frequency actually operating before the wristwatch, it would, let's call it, disturb the communication between the watch and the firearm, so it would not operate. And lastly, it's an electromagnetic locking mechanism. If you had a magnet and pull it down,
Yeah.
the Faras material would just go down and you would fire it without even using a wristwatch.
Hmm.
But as a firearm examiner, examiners need to be aware of such firearms. And if there was a case where the firearm supposedly malfunctioned, are we as firearms examiners going to investigate signal and information? And if not us, who will?
Hmm. Oh, it just got cut off there for a second. Sorry, I got it. So in talking, I was imagining this as you were speaking. You're talking about these are the technologies that are being implemented. There's new, for example, manufacturing techniques that are being implemented or whatever. So do you see firearms examination becoming more difficult, or do you see, because there's other technology, it's almost like there's a little advance here, and then when you catch up, a little advance. I mean, do you see that gap separating more, or do you see it, sort of closing the gap a little bit?
No, to be honest, it's the gap is fairly small. It's not that big. It's the gap is not with the technology. The gap is actually with the resources that everyone is not aware of how to use it or doesn't have access to use it. So they're not familiar with such resources. This is something that is not a secret. Most of the virtual equipment out there or the scanning equipment is not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And and sadly, not everyone can afford different products. So you would see, for example, one country or one city or one police force having, let's say, all the bells and whistles, and whereas the other lab has something that was really old. Okay, so when you present this in let's say a seminar or a conference, uh, although this may be very normal for some people, but it may be really new for others. So it's a matter of not excuse me, the technology actually going very high. It's actually the accessibility of the examiners to those technologies.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, we're getting on in time a little bit here, but I want to say thank you. And is it okay if I just show your LinkedIn, if anyone
Yeah,
wants to get?
please,
Okay.
for
Yeah. No,
sure.
I think yeah,
Yeah,
there's some excellent insight for you. And if anyone wants to reach out to you, you can reach out to Mohammed here just through LinkedIn. You can find him there, no problem. That's how I found him. And he's pretty active. He's got some great posts and things like that he's been doing, some great work that he's doing as well. So, Mohammed, hey, thank you so much for today, for your
anytime.
insight. Yeah, I really, really appreciate it. And I hope we stay in
Always
touch. I'd like to
always
talk
a
to you more
pleasure.
about.
Always a
Excellent.
pleasure, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hang back here, and then I'm going to come back in a bit, okay?
For sure.
Excellent. All right, folks. Well, that does it. Some great insight from the other side of the world here. It's nice to see that some things are a little different and some things are the same. Some of the same challenges many times. So that does it for this episode. We will see you next week, and I wish you all a great day. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye-bye.